Hi, this is Joe Shannon. I'm a lawyer, a husband, a father of 6 kids, and I also host a podcast called Opening Statement with Joe Shannon. Please consider listening to our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple, and any other folks that host podcasts. Just Google Joe Shannon and podcast, and you'll find it. I hope you enjoyed the show. So, hey, I'm really pumped, excited. Just really, this is going to be one cool interview, folks. So hold on. We got Chef Michael Fenster, who's also a doctor. So I was looking through all of his titles. He's an MD, FACC, FC, FSCANI, PMBA, all these different things, which I don't know, but I'm going to, and he likes to be called Chef Dr. Mike. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I get called a lot of things. As long as I'm not called late for dinner, I'm okay.
There you go. So I'm going to read a little bit of this. It's okay, just so people have the background.
Sure.
America's only board-certified intervention cardiologist and professional chef. He currently holds appointments, faculty appointments at the Kansas Health Science Center, West Virginia University School of Medicine, and cross-faculty appointments at the University of Montana College of Health School of Public Health and Missoula College Culinary Arts Program. Currently teaches one of the country's leading courses on culinary medicine at the University of Montana. He also serves on the editorial board of the academic journal, the Journal of Integrative Cardiology. I don't know if I said that right, but anyway, really excited for a number of reasons, as we talked about, to meet you. So welcome to the show.
Well, thanks. Thanks so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay, so I'm in suburban Chicago. I'm a kid that grew up in Yakima, Washington, so kind of the Montana experience. And we, when I found out that we were going to do the show, I was like, okay, this guy hits all the different things I like. My brother, a country doctor up in this place called Colville, Washington. I don't know if you know where that is. It's up in the northeast corner, north Spokane. My wife I think she's one of the best chefs in the country because I eat her food all the time. And my daughter's going to medical school, so I got all these questions for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's rock and roll.
All right. So tell me, where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
I was actually born in South Bronx. Like, if you ever remember that old movie, Fort Apache, The Bronx.
Yeah.
I'm a native New Yorker. So that's where I was born. And like everybody, in New York City, you eventually move out. If you're in Brooklyn, you move to the island. If you're in the Bronx, you move to Jersey. So I grew up in the Northeast. And then I went south. I went to the University of Virginia for college and essentially stayed south for many years. Like all good New Yorkers, eventually winding up in Florida. And there we actually worked at a hospital that gave us a TV show, a local cooking show, which was like, it was the funniest cooking show on television because it was so bad. I knew nothing about TV at the time. It was like Wayne's World. It was like cooking with Wayne's World. I mean, the microphones were swinging in front, swing. So it was totally hilarious. But as I got,
hold on a second. How do we get into? So basically, you're a chef, but you're also a doctor. Which came first?
Actually, the chef part came first. So my mom, like your wife, was a great home cook. And we moved around a lot when I was growing up. So back then there was no internet and I was always kind of the new kid. So the kitchen became kind of a sanctuary for me. So I loved cooking. I would, fake that I was sick to stay home with my mom, watch Julia Child on TV, go into the kitchen, and cook. I remember Graham Kerr, the Galloping Gourmet. We had all those cookbooks. So the kitchen kind of became, a real sanctuary for me. And I loved sort of the science of cooking. I've always loved the sciences. I love the art of cooking. And when I was in college to, help pay to go to college, I had to take a job. And so I started actually as a dishwasher. Back then, nobody wanted to do food. There was nothing glamorous about it. Right? You were working Friday, Saturday nights when all your friends were out. You got off at 2 a.m. smelling like dishwater. All your friends had already, finished for the evening. But I eventually worked my way up to executive chef. I later went on to go back to culinary school and get a degree. So I've always had a passion about food. And so the chefiness part of me actually came before the medical school part.
So let's map that out. So when you were in high school, were you thinking, hey, I'm going to be a chef?
No, I think I always wanted to explore the medicine aspect of it. And so for me, cooking and the kitchen was always sort of a sanctuary. I never really thought of it as a professional vocation. I was always really interested in medicine and the sciences and physics. My dad's a chemist. He's a PhD in chemistry. He's a very successful business person. So I always kind of had that leaning that, I wanted to explore that. As you mentioned, I'm an interventional cardiologist, which I absolutely loved doing. And I still do because I love that kind of the physics and the getting in there and helping people. So for those that don't know, an interventional cardiologist, we're the guys when somebody's having a heart attack at 2 a.m., we get called, we go in, we put the stents in, we open those arteries back up. So that's what I do for my day job, as it were.
You know what? I'm blown away here because, usually that's somebody's full-time, all the time job. And you basically saying that's my side gig.
Well, I worked pretty hard to get that side gig. So,
tell me about that. So tell me about the medical school. So you got your basically your chops on the cooking side,
yeah,
and the chef side. And then what made the decision to go, hey, listen, I'm going to go to med school?
Well, when I went to college, that was kind of the plan. So, you walk in, like most pre-med people do, in a huge auditorium of, 800 people. And then by the time you get through organic chemistry, it's weeded out, to a handful of people who survive organic chemistry, and then physics. And then you apply. So I always had that focus, which I really attribute. I really liked, did a lot of sports growing up. And growing up, I thought I was a much better athlete than I actually was. So I took, a lot of torn ligaments, broken bones, things like that, which actually led me to pursue martial arts, which I've done and still do for many decades. And so what I really learned in martial arts was a lot of focus, how to self-discipline, which I think would go a long way today in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
And so, when I set my mind to, hey, that challenge of getting through the prerequisites, getting into medical school, which I'm sure your daughter can appreciate, that was a task. So I had my focus, I had my eye on that prize going into college. The great thing about cooking was while you're doing all those hard things, like, the physics and the classes and whatnot, going into the kitchen and work was actually fun for me. That was my fun time was going into the kitchen, learning the techniques, cooking the food, work until 2 o'clock in the morning. Absolutely loved it. Still do.
So it was like a stress reliever for you.
Yeah. I think because of the way I grew up, the kitchen has always been my sanctuary. So it was a time when, I put the books aside and, I just delved into it. And, it's hard work in a very different way than being a physician or, being a student, a full-time student is. But it was great. And I loved it. And I still love getting in the kitchen.
So how long have you been a doctor?
Several decades.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
so
then a chef longer than that.
Yeah. And I've been a chef. So yeah, I've been cooking professionally before I was a physician. We had a restaurant. And now what I really enjoy is bringing both those passions together in helping people explore culinary medicine, in which, from a chef's perspective, don't even think about the nutrition, just think about having a delicious meal, a great food experience. That's what a chef brings to the table. This podcast will be loaded with bad puns, by the way, disclaimer. And then from the, from the medical side, we want to eat those foods, that sustain us. So culinary medicine, is all about feeding the body, but also feeding your soul. And as we're learning in medicine, all these things that I call the softer edges. So when we eat, how we eat, with whom we eat, our attitudes when we eat, all these things end up having huge long-term implications, in our health. And a very simple example is depression. Right? We know that depression affects the immune system. Well, the immune system therefore then affects the gut bacteria. By affecting the gut bacteria, we make ourselves more susceptible to chronic inflammation, which leads to diseases like diabetes, heart disease, the inflammatory bowel diseases, etc. So all these things we're starting to learn are linked. And there was a great study done out of Harvard. It was actually two studies, the Grant and the Gluick study, called the Harvard Happiness Study when you put them together. And long story short, what they did was they looked at people over a lifetime, over 75 years, so generations. And the question they asked was, what is it that separates people out who live a healthy life, a long life, they feel good, etc., versus people who don't? Is it the amount of money? Is it your job? Is it your education, etc.? And what they found is that it's the quality of relationships, healthy quality relationships, not quantity. So it's not Facebook likes. It's the quality of those relationships that end up determining how healthy and happy we are and how long we live and so on. And so in culinary medicine, one of the most important relationships, obviously I'm biased, that I think we have is our relationship with food. For the history of humankind, our interaction with food has been a social currency for interaction with each other, and therefore the basis of relationships. And I guess you could hear in my story, food was a big part of my relationship with my mom, growing up. So it's really has shaped my world.
No, tell me about your mom. What's her story? Is she still in the Bronx?
No, my mom passed away a number of years ago from gastric carcinoma. Which was pretty tough because I just finished medical school, and she was diagnosed with gastric carcinoma a month after I graduated from medical school. So I was doing my internship, while trying to visit my mom while she was getting, chemotherapy and things like that. So she ended up, passing away from that. She had smoked cigarettes, as many people did, back in those days, which was also kind of a likely contributor to what happened. So she was a huge impact, in my life, still is, because of her love of food, her passion of food. That's something we shared. So that's, again, that relationship I had with my mom in the kitchens. I can remember her teaching me to make omelets and like I said, this and that, and the cookbooks. And I think in retrospect, she knew some of those days I was home on the couch watching Julia Child, I wasn't really all that sick, but she let it slide anyway.
Yeah, I've got 6 kids, and one of the blessings I think for them is they have my wife Michelle, who is, like I said, so I'm 100% Irish, roots from Montana, the Butte, Montana, the biggest hole on earth, and big Irish American experience there, and we ate a lot of canned foods, and we ate a lot of meat and potatoes, that type of thing. And then when I got married, so I met her in law school, we got married, I was introduced to this whole Italian world, which, growing up in New York, you understand it. The food was just so amazing. It was like stuff it was like a symphony, and I was like enjoying the symphony every night. But my kids have that relationship with their mother where they learn that it's not only just the meal, it's the worrying about the preparation for the meal, worrying about what the guests are going to be like when they come in, considering everything. And that's what breaks into that relationship thing you're talking about, is the quality of our relationships. I write about that a lot. I write about that the rich man and rich woman is the one that has deep quality relationships with people. And that food thing you're talking about, you got something there.
Yeah, I think, if you look at the history, I always like to say the history of food is the history of humankind. And for so many decades, until really probably the 1940s and 1950s, when the food pathways led by the United States changed so dramatically, food was central. Wars were fought over control of food. People wanted land, and on that land, they grew food, they raised animals. So even today, I think that is still, food is a very strong, as I like to call it, a social currency. So it not only is a big business, unfortunately, in some ways, but it's really central to our relationships. And when we think about it, if you talk to, for example, relationship therapists, they'll tell you, the romantic dinner is still, one of their tricks of the trade. And we often talk about having a business dinner, and it's that experience when the walls go down and we break bread and we share, and all of a sudden we're not two faces across the internet, we're not connected by an email, we have a shared experience. And I think what's really cool about food is you and I could sit down to the same meal. We share the experience, but the meal can be totally different to each of us, right? So it's again, that relationship with food really, to me, reflects our relationship with the world at large, because it's our personal reality that creates it. So that meal is what you make of it. Your world is what you make of it. The challenges in front of us, they can either get you down. You can say, oh, this is awful, I'm not eating this, blah, blah, blah. Or you could say, hey, I noticed these subtle flavors here and it's different and I might not have it again. Like I was watching the food shows, and I was watching Japanese food, which I love, having done martial arts. And, I'm not a big fan of natto. I've tried it. I would have it again. It's a fermented, like a soybean fermented deal. But I appreciate it, and I appreciate that experience, and I'm grateful for the experience. So when we view, I think, food in that context, in what I call the food experience, and in the context of a relationship, then we can start to heal ourselves with the foods we eat. And when we heal ourselves, we can start to heal those around us. And, if everybody did that, the world's a better place.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm really curious. So you obviously got a lot going on with the media now. You've got radio shows, you've got all this type of stuff. And so you're trying to share this message. Have you put it down on paper for a book yet?
Yeah, so I got actually 4 books out. So the first one was kind of a collection of little vignettes, kind of short thoughts, some recipes in there. That's called Eating Well, Living Better. The next book was called The Fallacy of the Calorie. It's really one of the foundation stones for the course we teach on culinary medicine. So it really looks at a lot of the myths and that still permeate our perceptions and teachings in terms of food and health. The idea that you need to watch the calories you're eating. I mean, calories have nothing to do really with our impact. To me, it's much the same as saying that you were gonna, grade the quality of your automobile simply by the miles per gallon it gets, which actually bears no relationship to what they tell you, right? So it's dependent on a lot of other things. So that kind of explores that. Then I did a book called Ancient Eats, which looked at, and if your wife has those Mediterranean roots, she'd probably enjoy, really looks at the diets of the ancient classical Greeks, which is the first Mediterranean diet, and the Vikings, which is, we would think in our minds, a very diametrically opposed a diet in terms of its ingredients. But what we find is when we look historically at foods and we look at cultures that have made an impact in the world, so Egyptians, the Mayans, the Chinese, Indians, the Vikings, the ancient Greeks, so on and so forth. What we find at the base of that is a very rich food culture, because if you're not feeding your body, you can't feed your mind and develop these cultural things, whether it's the conquest of the Vikings or whether it's the philosophy of the Greeks. So it kind of looks at those diets and what lessons, excuse me, we can take away from that in our modern times. My most recent book is Food Shaman, which again builds on fallacy of the calorie and is one of the staples for the class that we teach in culinary medicine. And as I alluded to earlier, really looks at some of these softer edges. So how does this food experience, impact our health? And we talked about, our attitude, right? So depression can negatively affect your response to food in the same way that what studies have shown is that the act of ritual, so whether you want to say grace before you eat, whether you want to take a moment and give thanks to the produce and the animals that gave their lives, whatever it is in front of you. But when we sort of shift our gears and change our neurochemistry, that actually ends up having a positive effect in that we can measure in looking at reduced markers of inflammation in our bodies. And it makes sense. I mean, if we think about it, if I give you a great, wholesome, authentic meal, but I made you eat it in 5 minutes in front of a computer while you're getting ready for, that next meeting, the boss is over here, you're stressed out, the effect of that food on your body is very different than when you have, that same meal prepared by your wife at home and it's just you two having a romantic dinner.
Right. And, we have a tradition had a tradition. So we have a couple of traditions. The first tradition is I try anyway to have coffee with my wife every morning, just to kind of sit down, talk about what we're going to do. And talk about the children, etc. But then at nighttime, we will sit down and we will have dinner together. Typically, I mean, sometimes we don't, but I would say 4 or 5 times a week. And that's a nice thing. And just because I think there's the relationship part of that, hey, we care enough about each other to give the courtesy of each other's company. And then also somebody's preparing a meal for us and then somebody's going to clean up afterwards. It's a courtesy type thing that's learned and hopefully that's moved to outside the house.
I think it is. And I think that what you described, that's actually, our course that we teach is our Introduction to Culinary Medicine course, which we teach at the university, which is how I wound up in Montana. It's divided into 3 parts. And the first part is exploring what is culinary medicine. Why do we need something that's more than just nice recipes to accompany a nutrition class? The second part is what you talked about, which is these non-ingredient influences in what we choose to eat and how that impacts our health. So those things that you talk about doing, starting the morning with a shared experience, even if it's just over, a coffee beverage, at the end of the day, having that shared meal, it's turning out that those are incredibly important for healthy longevity, as much as exercises. So these things are things that I try to instill into my students, take away, we're much more than a collection of biomolecules, we're human beings. And therefore we need much more than a percent RDA, to sustain us. That's why we have the arts. That's why we have music. We have the culinary arts. So unfortunately in medicine, and why I think there's a need for culinary medicine to bridge these gaps, is the medicine approach is the nutrition approach. And in Western medicine, the power of what I do is that we get rid of the variables, we divorce things, and to focus and drill down. There is a clot in that artery, I've got to get it open, and I deal with that mechanically and, with pharmacology and so on and so forth. A much tougher question is, why did that clot form?
Yes.
Why did 2 people who live in the same house, and we've looked at studies with twins, for example, maybe even have the same genetics, take 2 very different paths, in health. And so there are all these other variables and influences. And, one thing that comes from a lifetime in medicine is life is short. So,
Yes.
Enjoy it. A healthy diet is not about deprivation. As I like to say, there's no salvation in deprivation.
Yeah. So this is really fun stuff. You see, as an intervention cardiologist, you're seeing these blocked up arteries and I bet some of it's related to genetics. True.
True. Right.
And then, but then with these twin studies, you're able to see a lifestyle approach and see how that goes. But I don't want to ever see you ever, with tubes coming my way. So, and I don't, none of the people listening to this, they definitely, nothing personal. We want to see the chef side rather than the doctor side.
Yeah.
So help us out here. I mean, listen, I like a good steak. I like having a glass of red wine every now and then. I like, really tasty food. We've heard all this stuff about keto. We've heard stuff about protein. We've heard about, the different Mediterranean diets, all this type of stuff. I know people should go read the books. But give us a little bit of a digest here.
Well, it's actually not very complicated. So what we teach, which is, as you could tell, our course is multidisciplinary. So we come at it from a lot of angles, but the bedrock of what we do is evidence-based. So when I practice medicine, it's based on the best available evidence, and that's what I use. And so it's the same with culinary medicine. So, for example, there's all these myths. You talk about a steak. The steaks get a bad rap the same way eggs got a bad rap because they're a source of fat, particularly saturated fat. Well, it turns out when we look at saturated fat, multiple meta-analyses, that saturated fat doesn't correlate to the risk of cardiovascular disease. Bombshell, right? But what does correlate to our risk of this chronic inflammation, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, really is the modern Western diet. And when we get to the root there, what we find is that is built on a platform of adulterated foods in the name of convenience. And so and again, it's really no big surprise, right? When we get back to eating foods as Mother Nature intended for us, which means the way our bodies were designed to eat food, and not just our bodies, right? We have this gut microbiome that we're just learning about, less than a decade's worth of real research and study into that. But in terms of the cells that make up the organism that is you're around 100 trillion cells. It's estimated that for every human cell, there's about 1.3 to 1.5 bacterial cells that live in your body, on your body. And so these have a huge impact in our health because they co-evolved to co-metabolize the food we eat. So in a sense, in culinary medicine, we spend some time talking about this gut microbiome because we have to understand that when we consume food, we're actually a synergistic being. It's us, it's bacteria, there's yeasts, protozoa, viruses, etc. And when we eat unnatural things, and I'll give you a quick example. So I remember being a cardiology fellow and reading these studies at Journal Club, and that we would look at things and say, wow, when these studies came out and people used artificial sweeteners, so there's no calories now, you're cutting the sugar out, you're cutting the calories out, they have an increased rate of cardiovascular events, i.e., when they looked in these studies, more people compared to those who had, water or wine had heart attacks, they had worse heart attacks, they had more heart disease. How could that be? We were taking the sugar out. This didn't impact with the human body. Now let's fast forward a couple of decades, and what a study published in Nature looking at a mouse model showed is those artificial ingredients totally disrupt the bacteria. And in essence, it's like going into the inner city, burning it down, and completely changing the neighborhood. So now, instead of a home garden, you have, Fukushima. And nobody wants to eat the fresh vegetables from Fukushima, because they're radioactive. So you have this environment inside you that promotes inflammation, which leads to chronic disease. And
so you're basically, you suggest, hey, all of this artificial sugars, this diet Pepsis, all that kind of stuff is basically lab stuff and not grown stuff. And you're basically saying the lab stuff, leave that on the shelf. Let's get back to the garden.
Absolutely. And it's not just me saying that, that's why I think between Food Shaman and Fallacy of the Calorie, there's something like 1,500 references to scientific journals. So this isn't, Chef Dr. Mike's opinion. What Chef Dr. Mike has done is read those 1,500, articles and distill this information, but they're all footnoted in there. So you could say, I can't believe I can eat red meat. I can't believe saturated fat doesn't cause cardiology disease. Chef Dr. Mike, you're full of BS. Well, here's the meta-analysis. You can read it yourself and make your, I'm a big believer in don't just tell me your opinion and kind of show me the fact, right? I'm from New York. Forget about it. Show me the study. And,
well, listen, I'm a trial lawyer, and facts are very stubborn, and that's we want the facts. And so
yep.
So your next book is going to be, you're going to be the Sherpa, the food Sherpa. You're going to say, listen, I looked at all this stuff for you. I looked at all these mountain passes, and I'll tell you the right path to go. It's this way, guys. If you want to go down that route, go ahead. There's a bunch of bodies down there. But
yep.
the unique thing I think is cool is you're seeing people as a result of what they shouldn't eat, I'm assuming that you're big time into exercise too, right?
Oh yeah, as a martial artist, that I've done for many decades, and of course living in Montana, last week when it wasn't snowing in June, I went out, and spent 4 or 5 hours, just hiking the mountains. And, and part of that is sort of understanding and listening to our bodies. As I said, I had a lot of, injuries growing up because I wasn't that great an athlete, but I tried really hard. And as you get older, those things sometimes come back to haunt you in terms of joint aches and things. So, I can't do high impact stuff that I used to do. One of the reasons I got into the healing aspect of food is very personal. I went, actually because I had an ingrown toenail, I went to see a podiatrist because I was getting married and I knew we were going to do some walking, we were going to get married in the UK. My wife her roots are 100% Irish as well. And, I said, well, I don't want this to bother me. Let me go get it taken care of before we leave. So the podiatrist comes in and he looks at me and he looks at the x-rays. He goes, I'll be right back. He goes out, he comes in. He does the same. He does this like another couple of times. He comes and goes, can I ask you something? I was like, sure. He's like, do your feet hurt? And I was like, yeah, my feet hurt all the time. He's like, I don't even know how you're walking. He's like, you have no toe joints. Your ankle bones are worn down. And he recommended immediately I have a joint replacement. And I said, well, let's just do the operation to clean out the joint first. And then if I need it, I can always get a joint replacement. And that was over 20 years ago. And at that point, I was eating the junk food because, as an intern, as a resident, back in the day,
Sure.
There was free food everywhere and it was crap. It was all fast food. I worked horrible hours. So you'd be, going, I did medicine in Winston-Salem, which is the home of Krispy Kreme donuts.
Yes.
So when you finished, finally at 5:30 in the morning, the red light was on. It was coffee, a couple glazed donuts, so you could go make rounds at 8 o'clock. And I changed all that. I literally just stopped. And
how old were you when you changed?
I was in my mid-20s.
And so you've been living this for decades.
For decades, right?
Have you noticed a difference?
Oh yeah, I mean, I actually feel better now in many ways than I did in my mid-20s. Back then, not giving up an ounce of flavor. I shed some pounds, which made exercise easier. And even like today, I love bread. I'm a bread guy. But
me too.
I don't eat.
Is bread okay?
Oh, I love bread. But again, this goes back to our teachers in culinary medicine. I make my own. It takes really about 15 minutes in the morning to make bread. I do it while my coffee's brewing. It's great. Nature does the work. Mix the stuff up, throw some yeast in, come back later. Nature's done all the work. But I don't eat bread when I'm on the road and when I'm out, in other than some rare circumstances when I know how it's made. So you'll never see me, going through a drive-through and buying a sandwich or something. And when I eat, because if I eat that, I don't feel good. I've learned to listen to my body. So I can tell, good food from bad food. And many of the people who I talk with this about this with, particularly, patients, right? They'll write to me afterwards and they're like, Doc, I don't know how I was eating what I was eating because now I can't even walk into a fast food restaurant. To me, with the food, it's very much like having patients who smoke. They smoke 2 packs a day. They have a heart attack. We put a stent in and say, you can't smoke anymore. You'll clot your stent off. And I'll see them, back in 6 months and they're like, Doc, I can't even walk into a room where somebody's smoking now because it's gross. I feel awful when I smell that. I don't know how I sucked packs of cigarettes into my lungs. And it's the same way once you break the modern Western diet, which is constructed to be addictive, and you start rediscovering your taste buds, the simple joy of good food, which is like what your wife makes, so you're ahead of the curve there. But real food, once you have that, man, it's like flying first class. You can't go back behind the curtain.
That's funny. Yeah. A couple questions that I like to ask people. Obviously you told us about really influential people in your life. So you told us about your mother, and I could tell that you were, basically getting a little verklempt over that, which, to me, I think of my mother, I start crying. I'm Irish. But is there other people in your life that basically kind of said, hey, that you looked at and said, this person made a real huge difference in my life?
Yeah. One I would say are my martial arts mentors. They helped me save myself from myself. There was Hatsumi Sensei who shared his martial art with us, Westerners. He opened it up, from Japan. And, some of my mentors there have been very influential. I started getting into martial arts in my late teens because I couldn't do some of the other sports that I wanted to do because I had torn ligaments in my ankles and so on and so forth. So I started getting into the martial arts and really went into it. And that wonderful experience, and also that exposure to the philosophy and kind of an Eastern way of thinking in my formative years really shapes me, and how I approach things and the things that I do. So that was really a fundamental construct in determining kind of who I am today, was the martial arts. And it came at a time where I was what you might call today a bit of a rebellious youth.
Sure.
And in retrospect, my mom was a saint, and so was my dad for not excommunicating me from the house at an earlier age.
Yeah, no, I get it. I was that way too. I don't know how my parents dealt with me, man. I can't figure it out. But so, tell me, your first job was a dishwasher, you said?
Actually, well, my mom owned a plant shop. So from a young age, I was always, if you want something, you go out and earn it. So, I had newspaper routes. I went door to door selling vegetable and flower seeds. My first kind of real job was my mom owned a plant shop. So I worked at, her plant shop during high school. I also worked on the grounds doing, landscaping, cutting lawns for a company. All that was before college. And then when I went to college, my first, real independent job, I would say, kind of full-time in the workplace, was a dishwasher. So I literally sort of started at the bottom.
I love it. And then tell me why Montana, buddy. I mean, so you could go anywhere in the country, in the world, probably. You probably go anywhere in the world.
Well, I actually love Montana. And so I was doing some traveling work up in Montana, and I met the dean of the College of, at that time it was the College of Health Science and Professions at the University of Montana. And by total happenstance, he had read my latest book. And so we got to talking, and he invited me to participate at the university. And eventually, where we are today, I'm teaching culinary medicine, which is my passion now. And at that time, we were in Florida, and so I was doing more and more with the university, which I would tell folks is I actually do all that pro bono. Just to get the word out. Because that's, you know, one of the things I teach in the class, which is something you have to have, I think, if you're going to be good at anything, but certainly if you're going to pursue food, which is a hard industry and hard hit right now, and medicine is, you know, passion. And this is obviously something I'm very passionate about. So, you know, I love teaching. And so we came up here and visited, and we had been living in Florida, and the only thing that Montana doesn't have is ocean. We have a big lake. I live on the, you know, if you were in Butte, you know, further up north is Flathead Lake. So it's the biggest, deepest sort of loch type lake west of the Mississippi. So we have that body of water, but outside of the ocean, I absolutely love Montana because I love the outdoors. I love nature. I said I head out my backyard, and the next civilization I'll see is somewhere in Idaho.
One of my buddies lives up there in Great Falls, and you know, I was talking to him recently, and I said to him, I said, hey, what's the best part about Montana? And he says, I can't, we don't have enough time. He loves to go fishing up there. He loves to golf. He likes the hunting. My cousin Kevin, he leads, he's kind of a guide. He's been doing it for 20 years, you know, how to hunt in Montana. Wow. It's just such a beautiful place.
It is, but I'm sorry to tell everyone who's listening, we're full. So.
No, I get it. You know, I went to school in undergrad in Portland, Oregon, and then I practiced law there for 4 years. And we were always telling people, hey, it's full. There's no more, you know. But it didn't stop the people coming north. They kept coming and coming and coming and coming. So, and, you know, you guys got all the movie stars out there now.
Yeah, well, and great. You talk about Great Falls. That's the home of Phil Jackson, Chicago Bulls.
That's right. And yeah, he writes some pretty good stuff. I mean, I like reading his stuff, and I kind of enjoyed that whole miniseries during the COVID thing. That was kind of fun to watch.
Oh yeah, and you think about, you know, his growing up in Great Falls and being exposed to the Native American culture is what shaped him and his philosophy as a coach. You know, which allowed him to have those personalities of, you know, a Dennis Rodman and a Michael Jordan, and be able to make that a cohesive unit. So, you know, it's all these, you know, little kind of details that go into the mix that are kind of fascinating sometimes when we look in retrospect. To me, those are all the, you know, again, to get back to food, you know, it's when you approach food that way, right? It's these little things. It's that little extra bit of seasoning. It's that little extra time you take to trim something. You know, I always say, and it applies particularly in medicine, the difference between good and great is attention to detail. You know,
there's one thing you mentioned, passion, but you know what? There can be a lot of people about, and I tell this to young people, I say, you can be passionate about something, but you better know what the hell you're doing. You know, and you know, that's the thing. That's the thing that's really cool that we're talking about is you've read the 1,500 studies. You actually see the physical bodies of people that have their life's been crushed by their diet, and you actually have you know how to create good food. So that, I mean, you need to get your message out, pal. So I'm going to help you. So if anything that I can do, let me know. I'm hopeful that you will come back on the show down the road, and we'll talk about all the different communities that we're penetrating, because that's the thing. You know, I think I live near a really big city, Chicago. Okay, I'm in the suburbs. And I think that everybody in America, because I absolutely love this country. I like I said, I'm the 9th of 10 kids. I think at the zenith, my dad made 18 grand a year.
Wow.
Growing up, we did not have good food. And mom, she won't feel bad because she knows that she liked good food too. But the thing that I would really like to see in America is that everybody gets to taste that first class food that you're talking about. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's more expensive. It just means that maybe we have to have different delivery systems, different ways of approaching the food, and different ways of access to the food. So if there's any way that I can get on that bandwagon, chef, doctor, whatever you like to be called, I'm in, man. And if I have to come to Montana to visit you, I'm in.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. And you're absolutely right. You know, I did something in Florida. We did a series on a show there, daytime TV, and I took these. I guess we used to call them food stamps, but I guess it's called SNAP now. Budget, and showed how do you eat for a week on that with this great food. And so I bought an organic chicken. Well, that's twice as much as a regular chicken, but it's all about the culinary aspect. So when I ran the professional kitchen, food costs are our biggest cost. So you learn you don't waste anything. So when I break that chicken down and have a carcass, that makes chicken stock. I'm not paying $6 for a container of some celebrity chicken stock. I'm doing it for 6 cents, and it's better and better for you. People, are spending all this money now for bone broth, right? That's nothing more than the stock we make, because it's vegetables and bones. It's what we call the trim. So when I cut that carrot top off, you don't throw it away. You save it. You save those onion peelings. And it goes into, a stock pot with that chicken carcass. You add some water, you come back in a couple hours, and it's magic. It's culinary magic. And it's also culinary medicine. So those kind of ways to approach sourcing your ingredients in an economical fashion, that's a big part of it. Because people say to me, well, I don't have a doctor's salary, I can't shop at Whole Foods, I'm on a budget, how do I do it? Lots of ways to do it. That's how we run restaurants, because they still got to turn a profit.
Where do people look for that online? Where can they find that thing you put together for folks that don't have the money to buy that type of thing, but they're on SNAP and they need to get those type of ingredients? Where can they go? Be the Sherpa.
We're actually revamping our website, because we're launching our online course that I teach at the university. Will be online for the general public in a not have to enroll at the University of Montana kind of way. And so we're revamping. But if they go to Chef Dr. Mike, chefdrmike.com, there's resources that we're in the midst of putting back up, and some of those are little videos. So for example, I did one during COVID. I called them practical culinary medicine. We belong to a CSA, a farm co-op, and so every week I go down and get my fresh vegetables. I don't know what they're going to be, and one week they gave me beets, these beautiful organic beets, absolutely delicious. Well, since it's an organic farm, you get everything. So you get the stems and the greens. And a lot of times people will throw those away. So I took those beet greens and made a pesto with some fresh ciabatta bread that I baked up and really good olive oil. Super simple, but I had a whole, another meal out of what a lot of people would just throw away. And that's how you extend those things. And so that's, we did a little video on that. So all those resources will be on the website. Just bear with us. We're in the midst of revamping everything.
That's chefdrmike.com.
Yeah, chefdrmike.com.
Okay, Chef Dr. Mike. So I'm going to hold you to that. But also, I got to say, I got to believe my son, he just turned 20. He's going into his junior at Marquette. He's thinking about food all the time as far as the right way to make it, all that kind of thing. And maybe he sees his role model here and says, hey, listen, I want to be like Mike. You know what I mean? That's the thing. You're the new be like Mike guy. I hope I don't get sued for trademark on that one, buddy. But this has been a really cool interview, buddy. Thanks so much for taking the time.
I totally appreciate it, mate. Yeah, it's been great. I'd love to come back, and I appreciate you helping me, spread the word out there. So we want everybody to eat like Mike.
Yeah, we definitely want that. And but don't. I hope you don't retire. I hope you just keep going at it. And
this isn't work. There's no way I retire. This isn't work. I mean, I love getting out and speaking for folks. I love showing folks how to cook. So, we're actually working to maybe try to put together, if the media ever opens back up and we can travel and do things again, get out there, get some things, on the small screen, the Netflix type screen. We'd love to do those, whether they be, documentaries or going around. So we've got all these things kind of in the pot, as it were. So yeah, stay tuned. We're working on getting this out. I think this is important.
How many culinary medicine courses are there throughout the country?
Well, it's interesting. So if you Google it, I think you get like 23 million hits, but there's very few that are taught at an academic level. So obviously ours is a vetted course. It ranges all the way from really nothing more than nutrition, and they give you some tasty kale recipes, all the way to stuff that, sort of borders on, fringe elements where they're not really paying any attention, to what the science is telling us.
Final question. My family watches these cooking shows, all of them. I mean, so Top Chef, all this type of stuff. The mean guy, what's his name?
Gordon Ramsay.
Gordon Ramsay. All these guys, which, my kids say I look like Gordon Ramsay. I say, come on, I'm not that mean. So anyway, they watch all that stuff. What are the ones that are your go-tos that you like to watch?
Oh, I like watching them all too. I try to learn something from each of them. Some of my favorites, I love Gordon Ramsay, and because great quick story there. People say, what's my go-to recipe? What do I know that I can cook really well? And it's risotto. And it's because I cooked it in a Gordon Ramsay restaurant. So I was with my wife at Petrus, which at the time was owned by Gordon Ramsay. The head chef was Marcus Waring, another brilliant chef. They weren't there when we were there on a weekend. It was Chef Andy and Chef Tristan, and we had a chef's table. And so they would come out and they'd tell us what they were cooking for us. And I was obviously conversing with them. And at one point, Chef Andy goes, "You seem to know a lot about food." And I was like, "Yeah, I know a little." And he's like, can you cook? And I was like, "Yeah, I can kind of cook. I mean, this is two Michelin star restaurant." He's like, "Can you cook risotto?" And so I was like, "Yeah, of course I can cook risotto." And he goes, "Good, come on back." And I was like, "Excuse me?" So they threw an apron on, they put me on the line, and I had to make a black truffle risotto in a 2-star Michelin restaurant. So I'm back there just like the people on Hell's Kitchen, right? So, and then I hear, "How much longer on that risotto?" I was like, 5 minutes, chef. And I'm doing, and I'm there and I'm cooking, and I go, "Risotto on the pass." And then I go back, and my station was kind of around a little corner. So I go back to my station, and then I peek around the corner to watch. And he's looking at me, and he puts the spoon up, tastes it, and goes, "Send it." And I was like, okay, if I made a black truffle risotto that made the pass in a 2 Michelin star Gordon Ramsay restaurant, I'm okay with that. So Gordon, although it wasn't Gordon, he always holds a soft spot in my heart because he sort of gave me a level of confidence in my cooking with that I carry with me today.
Wow. Well, listen, I definitely will be asking you back, and I appreciate your time, and sorry for the technical difficulties at the beginning, buddy.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah. And you know what? One of the rites of passage of my kids is they get to drive through Montana. It's 12 hours when they turn 15. So I'm hoping that my daughter Nora, who just turned 16, will be able to do that. And then Johnny when he's 11, and maybe we'll make a side turn and visit you.
Yeah, let us know. We're in Missoula at the university. So
all right. Take care. Let us know.
Thank you for listening to the opening statement with Joe Shannon. You can find us on the internet at shannonlawgroup.com or telephone our office at 312-578-9501. Have a terrific day.